So this video is intended for those individuals who need information on organelles, and it's the don't know yet session of it. And so to learn all of the functions for the organelles, you can turn to page 60 in your textbook, and you can make flashcards to study all of the different functions. So there is one organelle that I want to talk to you guys about in more depth. Because the function of this particular organelle, the mitochondria, is essential to anatomy and physiology. So going back to what we discussed before, we know that glucose, the carbohydrate, right? Glucose is the monosaccharide that is used to make energy called ATP for every single cell in our body. And the mitochondria is the organelle that is responsible for doing that. So ATP, if you don't know what it is, adenosine triphosphate, and it is the source of energy that cells use. You might be thinking, why can't we just use glucose? And the reason for that is it's just not the right currency. So I can give you an analogy to kind of explain that a little bit better. If you think about a soda machine, if you try to put a $20 bill in it, it's not going to take it. It's not the right currency. So you have to put a dollar bill for it to actually work. It's the kind of the same thing where our cells have to have the right currency, which is ATP. So it's important that we convert glucose into ATP so our cells can utilize that energy. In the picture that you're seeing, I know it's kind of cut off a little bit, and you can see right here, this is supposed to be glucose. I know you can see the cose of it. Glucose is C6H12O6, so just making sure that that's what you know that you're looking at. So you can also see in this equation that there's supposed to be oxygen. And so the only way that the mitochondria will actually go through the process in producing ATP is if oxygen is present. If oxygen isn't there, the mitochondria isn't going to go through cellular respiration to make ATP. So it's really important that the mitochondria has oxygen to do this. So once it does, the process can begin, and it will convert glucose into ATP. It's not as simple as just glucose to ATP. You can see it's a lot more complicated. So we have glucose and oxygen, and you see some other stuff going on in here. And to kind of give you an analogy of what that stuff is or what came from, I'm going to use an analogy, and hopefully this makes sense. So you know, when you have to do a project, let's say you create a poster and you have all the stuff that you need to create that poster with. Construction paper, glue, markers, whatever. You make this beautiful product and your poster, you're all done. But then you still have all this leftover stuff, right? So you used everything that you were supposed to create your poster, but you still have some leftover stuff that you're not going to necessarily use, but it's there. That's kind of the same idea. Your poster is kind of like how mitochondria uses glucose and oxygen, all of its supplies, to make ATP. So your poster is like ATP, and all that leftover stuff is like carbon dioxide and water. So you do end up getting that extra stuff that you don't necessarily want or use, but it's there. So it's important that we have ATP. So this is the equation. Let's see, let me move forward a little bit. So you can see here the equation a little bit better now. You have glucose with the help of oxygen now can actually enter the mitochondria. It goes through this process, which I'm not going to go into detail about, and it produces ATP, but it also has some leftover stuff that it creates as well, carbon dioxide and water. Now that ATP is there, the cell can actually use that energy and function properly. So why is it so important to anatomy and physiology? As you can see, every single cell in our body has to have ATP in order for it to function. If it doesn't have ATP, that cell is going to die. So I can give you an example. You guys have all heard of a heart attack. Heart attacks are scary, and what happens is the heart stops beating, and you may associate it with an artery getting clogged. And so when you hear about that, the artery is actually on the heart itself, and the artery is responsible for supplying every single cell inside of the heart with blood and oxygen. So if that artery gets blocked, that means the cells in the heart in that area is no longer going to get oxygen. If those cells don't get oxygen, then that means those cells are going to die because it's not going to be able to produce ATP. If it doesn't produce ATP, the cell's going to die, no longer functioning the way it's supposed to. Your heart is a system. If any part of that system gets broken, it's going to stop working. So when an artery gets clogged, it's no longer going to allow oxygen to get to those cells. ATP is not going to get produced, which then causes those cells to die, which then causes the heart to stop beating, which is a heart attack. So you can see here that this is very, very important that you understand this process and be able to make sense of it. So that is the mitochondria and the function. Hope you enjoyed the video.